Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome to the show Zach Blake, senior, heading into his final year at Cal in the MCLA, just elected team captain, all conference goalie. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be on.
Yeah. So we were just chatting before we hit record, and you grew up in Connecticut. Do you remember the very first time you jumped into goal?
Yeah. So it was a little rec lacrosse league game. My mom had made me go. I was kicking and screaming. I told her I was going to be in the NHL. I didn't need to go to the lacrosse game. And I'd always kind of wanted to play goalie in hockey, but I wasn't really brave enough to, step up and volunteer, kind of because we already had an established goalie on my team. So I figured, well, I don't want to be here, so might as well just try goalie now. And I hopped in cage, had a really, really good game. I remember it was like I took the first shot off my kneecap, and I wasn't scared of the ball. It didn't hurt. I was just excited to be out there. And that was kind of how it all got started. And I just kind of have never looked back since then. So, yeah.
It's pretty special when you get hit with that first one and it doesn't hurt. I think for a lot of goalies it does. I mean, what?
Yeah, no, yeah.
But it is kind of ironic that you said, like, I wasn't brave enough to be the ice hockey goalie, and then you jump into as a lacrosse goalie, where it requires way more bravery, if you ask me. Right?
Yeah. No, yeah, totally. I think that's where the I guess I have a screw loose comes in, because
yeah,
I don't. I think, like, when that first shot kind of hit me, just kind of the adrenaline took over. And, I'd always been a decent hockey player, not that good. And I realized, with that first shot, I was like, wow, I can actually make an impact, in a big way. So that was kind of what attracted me to it, always being in the spotlight, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Me too. I love the spotlight, for better or for worse. I mean, that's the beauty of this position. It's, you got the spotlight on you. Yeah, it goes both ways, right? And you can be. There was one great quote that I think it was Kip Turner said, "You can be the hero, or you can be the ass." And
exactly,
that's pretty much what it is. Well, that's cool. So, how did you then, from that very young age, how did you then go about, like, getting coaching or learning how to be a better goalie?
Yeah. Well, I was very lucky to have grown up in Connecticut. So I was surrounded by a lot of really good high school and college talent. I mentioned this to you earlier, but I went to school in New Haven, Connecticut, which is right in the backyard of Yale. So I was constantly exposed to it. Joined, a bunch of different club teams. But at the end of the day, kind of found a goalie coach, this guy, Chris Madelon. He played for the Atlanta Blaze in the MLL for a bit, played at UNC, and he's really the one that ended up becoming my mentor. I'd work with him 4 or 5 times a day, and 4 or 5 times a week in the summer, just kind of, honing my craft. And I think right around, the 12, 13, 14 age is when I really started to take it really seriously and realize it was something I wanted to do for a long period of time. So, yeah. Interesting.
What gave you that realization? I'm running this event next week. This is something that I want to do. I'm running an event next week, and a training event, and I sent out this email today, and a lot of parents reply back like, "Hey, I wish I could get my kid more interested in being a goalie. She he's just not, like, fully into it." What to you kind of made you realize, like, wow, this really is for me?
Honestly, I think it was watching live lacrosse. Sitting on the defensive side of the Yale bleachers, and just kind of watching their goalie and how much of a leader he was. I don't remember his name. It was kind of a shorter guy like me who was in cage for them when I was like 13 or 14. And kind of just watching the way, like, hearing in person in ways you can't see on TV, the way the goalie was leading the team, the impact the goalie has on the team just through, like, motivation and, making all the guys juiced up. You could see the bench getting juiced up and make a big save. I think that was the biggest thing for me, is actually watching live lacrosse. Cause there's a lot of stuff the goalie does that you can't hear on TV, that, I think is really important to be able to see from a young age, to understand that kind of leadership position you have playing goalie.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I remember, I started playing in college at Cal. And so, like, you know, kind of your 13-year-old version of you is the 17-year-old version of me. And I remember we took this spring break trip out to Maryland to play some games, and we ended up going to a Hopkins practice, Johns Hopkins practice. So we're just like sitting on the sideline and kind of like they let us like watch, and I'm like, we just got so pumped up watching like this elite level of lacrosse and just watching like how they go about doing their business, and it was awesome. So I definitely feel that. Yeah. So we'll have to figure out what goalie that is, that Yale goalie, huh? It would have been, let's see, you're what, 19, 20 now? It would have been like 6, 7
21.
years ago. 21.
So
so like
it was around
6, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
All right, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, for sure.
I've been trying to get Chris on the show, on the podcast for a while, unsuccessfully. What did those sessions look like? Is he teaching you the technique, or a bunch of shots? What do they look like?
Yeah. Think like, 95 degrees in the summer, kind of blistering hot. And I think, a lot of it, like I remember my favorite drills, and what really got me going was the competitive type of drills where, it would be like, all right, I'm going to take 10 shots on the run on you right now. If you save 8 of them, you win. If I score 3 goals, I win. And I think from a young age, mixing in that really, really competitive aspect and kind of getting that competitive fire going. That was kind of my favorite and most memorable part. We would always end each practice with one of those. But I mean, we'd build it up from the bottom, like starting with, the typical stuff like just hands drills, kind of working all the way up. We did a lot of stuff with, I remember like this kind of tassel that would go between the head of my stick and my helmet, just to keep my eyes on the ball. Man, I mean, I'd have to think we did hundreds of different drills that were pretty unconventional at the time. And, obviously, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, we'd finish that with that competitive aspect. That was probably my favorite part, but the build up to it was really, he'd break down every single part of my game and work on it individually. And, a lot of conditioning too, that they weren't always the most fun. But, it definitely got me a pretty far along in my goalie career, I guess.
I love it. Did you tell him I signed up for goalie because that means I don't need to run?
Yeah, no, that's what I thought, and then he had me chasing the ball behind the net, stuff like that. So
yeah. To that point about competition, that's a very important point. I think that it's just anytime you can work competition into a drill, it's a great motivator. Whether we're talking about an 8-year-old or whether we're talking about a 21-year-old, all the way in between. Anytime like there's just competition, it's like I want to win.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, I think people don't look at goalie immediately and think that that's a kind of position where you can have that mentality, but it totally is. It's one of the best parts of goalie, actually, the ability to like compete with the shooter, compete with the other goalie. Like that's honestly probably my favorite part of it. So I think it's a pretty important factor when you're starting out at a young age.
Yeah, interesting. So when you say compete with the other goalie, talk to me a little bit about that, because I think I understand like competing with the shooter. Obviously, hey, we're going one-on-one. But are you, are you, when you're playing, are you like, all right, I'm gonna outsave this other guy. I'm gonna make more saves than this other guy. Is that kind of the mentality?
Not as much. It's a pretty impersonal form of competition. It's more like, I'm not necessarily thinking about him or the amount of saves he's making. I'm thinking more about momentum in the game. And I'm thinking about how he's taking away momentum from our team and how I can kind of respond to that. And I think some of the most fun games I've ever played in is when both me and the other goalie are playing really well. Both teams are trying to generate momentum and they really just can't because both of us are playing really well. So it's definitely not, I think you can get into a trap thinking about the amount of saves the other goalies has. Because like in that situation, you're like comparing yourself to something that you can't control, which is something you can't really ever do in goalie and be successful. So I think it's more of an impersonal kind of momentum kind of competition that I enjoy, I guess.
Great point. Yeah, great point. I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah, because I was thinking like comparing yourself to others is a recipe for disaster.
Oh yeah, totally.
And anything that you do, I mean, especially like in the online arena, like what I do, like online coaching, like you look at someone in their Instagram or their Twitter, their what have you, and it's like you're not even comparing like apples to apples. You're comparing like, you know, someone who's just starting to like a professional goalie and being like, oh, I need to be like that guy. But
exactly.
Yeah. So that's interesting. And yeah, I love the concept of capturing momentum. Obviously, the best games are the ones where like both goalies are on. But there's certainly like, I'm sure you've played in games where like it's been a shootout. I've had games like that. And it's like all you need at that point is like one or two big saves and like momentum is back on your side, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think those are the toughest games because you really have to pull it out of you to be able to get that next save. When the other team's getting a lot of shots on the crease or when you're just not having a good day. I think that, you know, it's hard to remember that your primary goal on the team is to try to win the game. It's not to make, you know, to get a certain save percentage, it's to win the game. And so in those situations, I think just reminding yourself, I'm here to help my team win the game instead of, you know, I'm here to get a 55% save percentage or whatever. I think that's been the most helpful to me in those type of shootout games.
Yeah, totally. And sometimes it only takes that one save. Or two saves, you know, especially in the women's game, like the women's goalies, just because of the nature of the game, like they get shot on so close that they make
position shots.
Make way less saves. And I got an email just to that exact point that you just said. And she's like, yeah, like my team won the game, but I didn't have a great game. And my save percentage was horrible. And I'm like, read that first sentence again. Right. Your team won the game. You won the game. Right. You won the game. And that's what this is all about. And yeah, we want to play good, but at the end of the day, like we just want to do what we can to help our team win.
Yep. Exactly.
But yeah, I remember a very specific game. We played St. Mary's at St. Mary's and they were not that good as us. And I just like was way off and our whole defense was just struggling. And I think the final score was like 21 to like 19 and we won. Right. But it's just, you know, you're like, man, I got to play better.
Yeah. It's a tough feeling.
Yeah. Do you guys still play St. Mary's, by the way?
I think they're in like the D2, maybe something like that. So we don't play them, but
yeah, got it. Well, very cool. So did you ever, you know, you're playing in high school. I imagine you have some success in high school. I think you even, you know, you're kind of juggling Dartmouth and Cal and maybe a couple other schools. Talk to me a little bit about your decision to end up attending Berkeley.
So the Dartmouth decision wasn't all mine. It didn't really work out in admissions, which was tough because, you know, you go through years and years and years of like playing club lacrosse and always trying to play D1. That was always my goal. And then, you know, I was kind of left with it was like a preferred walk-on kind of thing where like if I got into the school, I would have a spot on the team. But unfortunately, you know, and coach wrote me a letter and all that stuff, but it just didn't work out. But honestly, that's been the best thing that's happened to me in the last like 5 years because it kind of opened my eyes to the West Coast and that being a possibility. Because, you know, after Dartmouth, my options were really pretty small D3 schools on the East Coast, like in the Northeast, or, you know, going out there and playing MCLA on the West Coast. And you know, honestly, it has been pretty awesome. I don't totally remember your question. What did you ask again?
just the recruiting process and I think you got it. I think you hit on it. I mean, it's a good story there.
There yeah.
I was going to add on that. It's just sometimes funny how life works out that way. I think. I really do. I applied to both Cal and Stanford, and for like a while, I really wanted to go to Stanford, and I got rejected. I didn't get in. And it was kind of a bummer, right? Like you're kind of like, I'm sure you felt the same way with Dartmouth, but then I ended up like visiting friends there when I was at Cal, and I was just like, man, I don't know if I'd like it here. I really don't.
Yeah, no,
so I'm like, I think like I think it worked out.
No, it definitely did. You got to remember in recruiting, like, you know, unless you're the best goalie in the world, you're probably not going to get to play at your top choice school. So I think it's really important to just remember that, or like this is what helps me is I kind of just think everything in recruiting happens for a reason. And
Yeah.
if it doesn't go necessarily the way you thought it was, you got to remember you're a 17-year-old kid. You have no idea whether this school or that school is going to be like the perfect place for you. And I think what really helped is when I got to Cal, I realized like, man, I wouldn't have ever had any idea that this was the place for me. And here I am out in California, like 2,500 miles from home, having a great time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's an amazing experience, like totally unrelated to lacrosse, but just an amazing experience that you got to factor in.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
talked to a goalie who went to Syracuse and he ended up not liking it because like wasn't much sun. He was used to a lot of like, he's from Florida, right? So there's a lot of sun. And it just all these factors that you got to consider when you think about finding a great place to play.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
So you mentioned being a shorter goalie. I'm also a shorter goalie. How tall are you?
I'm 5'9".
I'm 5'8". So we're both on the shorter side in terms of goalies. Like how do you describe your style of goalie play? And then when you got to Cal, did that change at all?
Yeah. So I play I crouch pretty low, I would say, because I feel that it helps me get to low shots easier and charge up for high shots easier because I can get more momentum from a little bit lower of a stance. I think that I've always been a pretty athletic goalie, like using my legs, my feet a lot to make saves. And so I guess when you get to college, you kind of realize that athletic style of play, it can help you, but you have to learn how to like control it in a way. I think I was kind of a flopper in high school on some low shots, and I realized pretty quickly that didn't really work at all in college because I think one is that the shot pace is faster, so you're going to get more stuff hitting you and going in if you're not saving fundamentally.
Mm-hmm.
And then two is just that it's way harder to predict the release. And so I think for those two reasons, I kind of, when I got to Cal, I had to hone myself in a little bit and really just get back to the fundamentals, which my coach Casey Keenan, he is a goalie coach at my school. And he really helped. He really broke me down. We actually had kind of a dynamic between, he was the nice coach. Then we had this other guy, Joel, who wasn't the nicest. He'd kind of come in and rip you apart. But it really helped me to kind of see where my weaknesses were, and work on my mental game during practice because I had a guy actively trying to, just rip my confidence apart. So, yeah,
that's funny. I had Coach Keenan on the podcast. He's awesome. Episode 86. People can check that one out. It's interesting about the mental game piece. Yeah, it brings up these. So I was in a fraternity at Cal, and like, when you go through the first year for the fraternity, like people try to get in your head, they try to hate you. And and so like, I was very used to, hearing people yell at me and just like block that out and like not let that get, they're just words. Right. And now that you said that exact thing, like, I'm thinking that, that's the same thing on the lacrosse field. Like they're just words and they can only hurt you if you let them. And it sounds like that coach was giving you mental game training in his own way.
All in good fun, but it was it was definitely tough as a freshman. I remember first practice, he steps in for my warm up 10 yards away and just starts ripping it, and I was like, what do I do here? But in the end of the day, it was a good thing for me for sure. So yeah.
What did you do? You say take a step back, and they'd be like, no, come on, East Coast boy, you can handle it or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, that's good. I love it. What other things have you learned from Casey, mental game wise, technique wise?
I think the biggest thing from Casey specifically applied to my game is just like I think it's honestly mostly the mental game. Like when I come off like in between quarters, let's say I didn't necessarily have my best quarter of play. Like we always, after every quarter, we'll kind of like step aside from the huddle and just talk about specifically what we saw in that quarter. what we can do better. But I think the best thing about Casey is his ability to kind of never, like, always keep it positive. Like, even if things aren't going our way, just talk about what we can do better instead of talking about what we're doing badly. The other thing that I've really liked about Casey is that he really facilitates that, like, the goalie, like, goalies on a team or a unit. I had a really bad relationship with the other goalie and on my high school team. And I think that was partly because, like, my coach never stepped in and helped us form that group. And I think with Casey, every time we're talking about something I could do better in a game, it's not me. It's, this is what we're going to do better. And all the other goalies are there too. And we're talking about it as a unit. And so I think, other than obviously all the fundamental work he's done with me, all the ways he's made me a better physical goalie, I think also just making me a better part of the team, and a better leader has been the best thing he's done for me, I guess.
That's awesome. That's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if there's,
yeah,
if there's like a young goalie, I mean, I want to pick apart a couple points in there, but if there's, the first one is that, that bad relationship that you had. So if there's a young goalie that has a bad relationship, that can be really mentally taxing. Like, we talk about mental health as like a goalie. And if you're like not getting along with this teammate that you're like so involved with, right? Because you're in the same drills, you're working together, it can be really tough.
See him every day.
Yeah, you see him every day. And so, yeah, I mean, to your point, at that age, it's certainly the team culture, and it's a coach's responsibility to help create that culture. So, I mean, what would you, I mean, I don't know, what would you recommend that they do if someone's hearing that and be like, yeah, I do need to get my goalies on the same page? Is it kind of what Casey just did, like talking the we form, or other things?
You mean from a coaching perspective, correct?
From a coaching perspective, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I honestly think the biggest thing you can do is, like, everything is we, it's not I. It's never like pulling one goalie aside and saying, this is what you're going to do better. It's using one goalie as an example and saying, this is what we're going to do better as a team. And also, working on each individual goalie's problems as a way that the unit can get better, not a way that goalie can get better, if that makes sense. And also just fostering like off the field activities, where, like, the goalies can specifically get together and kind of take some of that pressure off, of being in, honestly, a lot of times a really, really tight situation where it's kind of hard to make a friend. But for instance, like me and the other goalie on my team that's kind of my age, like, we're really, really close. And I think that the only way that could have happened was Casey. So I think, especially from a young age, if you're a coach coaching young guys, like, you've got to facilitate that teamwork, that unit aspect, or honestly, I think, like, it just makes it really contentious, especially at a young age, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's great advice. Great advice. Yeah. And I mean, I love that point too, of like, some goalies struggling with one particular element, I mean, not pulling them aside unless it's a private thing, but normally, I mean, it's not, right? Yeah. It's like you're struggling with bounce shots. Hey, here's what we need to do to overcome that. And all the goalies are in and learning on it, even if they don't struggle with bounce shots, because there may come a time in their career when they do. It's kind of the way goalie works, Yep. So I love that. And then the other thing you mentioned there that I really love is the positivity. That's also like I don't know what the right word is, like something I just really believe in, and something that I preach in my coaching. I mean, there's some coaches that will just really nitpick on the negative. And I hate that. That's not my style.
Yeah. I think, I've had a lot of coaches. I've had coaches that were that way. And I think the thing that you have to remember as a coach is that, the goalie is facing more pressure than anyone else on the team. The goalie probably has more responsibility than anyone else on the team. So you have to treat it accordingly. Like, if one of the middies makes a mistake, it's not necessarily always going to lead to a goal. And almost every time when a goalie makes a mistake, it's in the net. So I think, I think just staying positive, even when things are going negatively, is like incredibly important. It allows, and just always reminding the goalie too, that, like, he has the faith, or he or she has the faith of their team. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. And just instilling that kind of culture, I think, is just something that a coach has a big part in. and is really, really, really important if you want to have good goalies.
Yeah. And when you do that, you know, just being at practice and playing the sport becomes a lot more fun. And as a result, when it's fun and you're enjoying it and you're having a good time with your friends, guess what? You play a lot better.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, definitely.
What would those conversations look like in between the quarters between you and Casey? You mentioned like you talk about what you're seeing. Like, just if you could take me through one, like what would be an example?
Yeah. So let's say that it's a lot about tendencies. So it's a lot about what the shooters are doing to try to beat me and to try to beat our defense and what kind of looks we're getting. Okay. Even at halftime, we'll take a sec to, instead of just a base warm up at halftime, it's here are the shots that they're taking. Like, cause look, like the shots that a team is taking are probably not going to change very much from one half to the next, unless they're making a big adjustment. So right. I think a lot of it is just keeping me prepared for the tendencies that are kind of happening. And also just, if I'm not getting a lot of action, just kind of keeping me up and reminding me like, all right, like get in the zone, like, let's be ready for whatever happens. The last part is just like situational awareness. So like if we're up or down in a game by a certain amount, just knowing what my role is outside of the cage and just making sure I know that, like, for instance, if we're going to go into like a 10-man ride, or if we're going to go into, if we need the ball back at the end of the game and I got to hop out of the cage, like just helping me to be prepared for those situations. And I guess then the last part is just mentally just making sure I'm up, making sure, to stay supportive.
Right.
I think, those three pieces are kind of the main stuff he helps me with in those conversations.
Yep. That's awesome. That's great advice for a lacrosse goalie dad too, like on the side, or mom for that matter, wanting to know how to help their kid. It's an interesting comment that you made about like the teams don't tend to change like where they're taking their shots from. And I was thinking about that as you said it. Totally true. It's totally true. I remember one of the biggest upsets that we had when I was at Cal, we beat, my senior year, by then we like graduated like the entire team and we weren't that good, but we played like number 3 in Arizona, and they were running this deuces offense, which was like the exact same thing that we did like, so we were used to defending.
Used to it.
So used to defending that. And so like, we were just on them every single time and they never changed. And they went through that the whole game, and we knew exactly where the shots were coming from and how to switch and how to defend it. And we ended up playing really great defense and beat them.
Yeah. And actually, I want to just add one thing that Casey will do to help me too, is like when we're in practice the week before a game, like he'll have a scout on the shooters they have, like probably 5-6 days before, and he'll actually be replicating all of those shots that I see in the game. And like we played Cal Poly the first time this year, like it was literally every single shot was the exact same shot that we had practiced. And that's just so valuable for confidence, going in and knowing what you're going to see. It's not always going to be a science, because sometimes guys are going to mix it up. But yeah, I mean, generally practicing tendencies the week leading up to a game, especially in college, I think is really helpful. So
yeah. And then like as a goalie, that helps you be a team leader as well. Like when you kind of understand like what they're trying to do, right? And you can kind of move your chess pieces around, like, and get your defenders to see the shots, on the same page, and to give up the shots that you want. You're like, I'll take that shot all day.
Yep.
So cool. What about were you a backup goalie at a certain point in your career? And talk to me a little bit about that. Like, it's tough, right? Because you want to be the starter, but there's only one of those spots. And how do you continue to get better?
Yeah, one of the biggest this was one of the biggest challenges of my life, not even lacrosse. Like being a backup goalie for 3 years in high school was probably one of the hardest things I've ever mentally had to deal with, because I just had a coach that was very focused on seniority, and it kind of was what it was. I couldn't really do anything about it. And even more frustrating, I think, was that, a lot of college coaches would ask me why I didn't start. And I didn't really know what to say in those situations, because, I look great on film. I have good club recommendations, but then, they ask about high school and I don't start, and they're, so I think, a few of the things that I did was, if you're backing up, like number one, you got to be a good team player. Like you have to be a teammate first, because that's your job. And, we talked about earlier, like, your first job as a goalie is try to win the game. And if you're actively negative towards the other goalie on your team, you're impeding his ability to save the ball, and in turn, your team's ability to win the game. So I think that's the number one thing, is you got to be a teammate. But I mean, speaking to how challenging it is, I just think that doing as much work you can on your own, and just kind of, outside of school, whatever you can, getting shots whenever you can, to build your brand and to build build the kind of goalie you want to be, independent of, whether you're the backup or not. I think that's also really helpful. That's something that I did in high school. I just get a lot of shots outside of practice. Yeah, I mean, I also know club, like it's pretty difficult to play club lacrosse in some areas of the country because it's kind of inaccessible. But like, if you can even just get a buddy to come shoot on you, like after practice, and show the coaches that you want to be out there and you want to try to win the game for your team, I think that's the most non-confrontational way to vouch for yourself, if that makes sense. Just putting the work in.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. Yeah, like some people. I mean, club lacrosse is growing pretty drastically. So,
Yeah.
I'm sure there still exists areas without a good club team, but less and less each day as the sport grows, which is amazing. But yeah, if you don't have, good high school tape or good club tape, I mean, create some tape of you doing drills and taking shots.
Yeah.
I mean, coaches would love to see that as well. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm thinking episode comes to mind that I interviewed Brandon Krebs, who just graduated from Manhattan.
Right? Yeah.
Zero starts. He played at on Long Island, right? Zero high school starts. Yeah. And he talked about the exact same thing that you did. You just got to go out there and like, you got to remain mentally tough, knowing that like I could be playing, I'm just not.
Yeah.
Right. Because of whatever reason, seniority or whatever reason, I'm just not, but just keep working hard and keep enjoying it. It sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Love it. What about a time you went through a slump? How'd you get out of that?
Let's see. Yeah. I mean, we go through slumps all the time, like even when you're playing at a high level, sometimes like, I think the biggest one for me, I'll think back to, the weeks in between our last regular season game and our first conference playoffs game. We had like a 3-week stretch where we didn't have any games. And it was tough. And this is always tough. It's also in fall ball. Like we practice most every day in the fall as well. And when you have no result on Saturday to know like how you're playing, and when you're just in practice kind of trying to almost compete with yourself to just I think that's when I'm at least most susceptible to slumps. It's because I feel like I have nothing to judge myself on, if that makes sense. So I think the biggest thing, at least what always helps me, I'm going to go back to it, is like putting work in outside of the field and making yourself feel accomplished no matter what happens in practice, and knowing that you put work in to make yourself better, even if, maybe you're not playing your best in practice. It always helps me when I'm having a bad practice to think, well, I might not be playing well right now, but I put the work in. I'm getting better. Right. It's just not showing up right now. So I think, again, going back to just, getting on the wall and honestly just like seeing as much rubber as you can. I think like putting in that extra work is what really helps me to get out of those slumps, just because, it allows me to kind of have a different, I guess, parameter for how I'm judging myself, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It's twofold too. Like when you put in the extra work, like one, like you're getting better as a goalie, right? But then two, like you said, it's the mental game. It's like, it's mentally, I know I've put in all this work. It's kind of like when you study, extra hard for a test, and then you walk in there and you're like, I got this. Like I studied so hard. Right. So it's kind of this twofold thing. I love that quite a bit. So extra work, baby. Yeah. Extra work is the key to earning that starting role and getting out of the slump. I love it. When we talk about the mental game, I think we hit on a bunch of lessons already, but when I say like mental toughness as a lacrosse goalie, what immediately comes to mind for you?
What comes to mind for me was playing Santa Clara this year and having like probably about 100 or 150 frat guys like right behind me, just yelling at me the whole game about my family and about, like a bunch of other stuff that wasn't too appropriate. That was the first time I felt that I had ever been like actively, trash talked. Because it doesn't happen a lot. And I mean, at least at my high school, I know there are high schools out there that are huge and they get a lot of fans, but for me, I think like mental toughness wise, I think like when, at least from this, I guess, angle, like when people are, giving you the talk, I guess, like using it, like, I guess my thought process is like, okay, this person is only saying this because they know I'm good and they're trying to bring me down. And like, they wouldn't be saying this to me if they didn't like, respect me. And so I guess it's a trap to think about it too much, but if you use it as almost like motivation or juice, that kind of helps me. And then the other aspect with mental toughness, I think if you're kind of getting down on yourself, I guess the best thing to do is like, I have some breathing techniques I'll do. Like if I give up 3 goals in a row, I'll try to just like reset myself in the goal. Taking 3 deep breaths sounds stupid, but it's something that I think actually helps a lot more than people give it credit for. And then I think also, with mental toughness wise, just like remembering that all your teammates got your back, and like, especially all your defenders in that unit, like they know that everyone has a role, and it's not going to be every day that you're doing your role, saving the ball perfectly. But I think when you have the trust of those guys, and you guys are all in it together, I think it helps a lot when you're going through a tough stretch of a game. If that makes sense.
Yeah, love it.
Tried to hit on both of those. I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of great points in there. The one that hit close to home was the MCLA fans talking trash, because that's like, it's just a new level. It's a different level because they're literally right on the sideline. Like I don't know in D1 and D2, like you have bigger stadiums, and actually I don't know. You guys play at in Memorial Stadium now, yeah?
We do, but I will say, I mean, that's the thing with MCLA lacrosse is like, the top 50 teams are probably all D3 caliber, like really good teams, all recruited guys, like, really good competition. But after that, it drops off, and it drops off significantly. So I think it's weird because some of the venues we play in are like D1, D3 kind of level, like, Chapman, Concordia, CU Boulder. Those are just a few that I could think of. And we play in the stadium, which is kind of nice. But then, some of the other teams we played, like, we had the mud crease, the grass field, the flip scoreboard. Like I remember one team actually had a flip scoreboard this year. So I mean, you're playing some of those kind of teams, you know what I mean? So
exactly.
It is interesting.
That was I mean, back in the day when I played, Sonoma State was really good, right? And they were exactly.
I was gonna say that was
exactly that. And like the guys would bring like sofas, couches,
sofas. They still do, and they still do cup holders. Yeah,
and they'd put them like literally right on the sideline, or like a foot back from the sideline, and just enjoy themselves on a Saturday and give the goalie the business. That was
that's how it is. Yeah, and
like
it is MCLA special, too. It's like, I don't know why, but in the MCLA specifically, some pretty intense trash talking.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But I don't know, Sonoma State's not very good anymore, huh?
Not quite as good as they used to be.
Yeah.
They still have that cool painted S in the middle of the field, though, I will say.
Nice. I love it.
It's the one thing.
Yeah, there you go. What does your summer program look like, Zach, to get better? So you're heading into your final year. Are you take a bunch of time off? Are you back to seeing shots? What is your summer training going to be?
Yeah. I do take about a month off. I think it's, the end of the season as a goalie is always really stressful, especially if you're in the playoffs. And we ended our season with a pretty tough 1-goal loss in the conference finals. And so I think I needed kind of needed that month to kind of reset myself in the other areas of my life to just make sure I was, achieving that balance that I want to be at. But then after that, I think a lot of it is just, for one, is just like staying in general running shape. It's not very important for goalie, obviously, but just feeling like, you're doing something to establish your fitness level is important going into the fall. And then the second thing is I'm lucky enough to live with a bunch of MIT lacrosse guys. So
Nice.
I go to the field with them and, get shots like 2 or 3 times a week. And then the last thing is like they've got a ton of ULAX leagues for college guys. And so, you can kind of join those. It's just like 1 game a week, even if you have a full-time job, it's pretty realistic. So those are some of the things I'm doing. Probably not as intense as what a D1 guy would be doing right now, but yeah, I mean, it's the way I kind of feel like I can stay in shape, and maintain, I guess, my level.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Do you think with all the goalie experience you have right now, what would you tell the younger Zach, or what advice would you give to the younger Zach about goalie?
I think something that like my coach says a lot is like you it's kind of cheesy, but you win or learn. You don't win or lose, and when you lose or when you win, you're kind of learning from that. And I think what I would tell my younger self is don't get too high and don't get too low, because I think I can think back to a lot of points in my high school and early college career where things were going well and I felt absolutely amazing. And, when things started to not go my way, or the first inkling of something kind of getting off track, I was very, very quick to get really down on myself. And so I think, and even one of our captains and one of the defensemen on my team this year came up to me, and he was like, when you show like negative emotion, it's not just you. It's all of us that feel that, because you're the last line of defense. And when it seems like you are unable to do your job, all of us feel like less confident in our ability to do our job, because at the end of the day, the defense job is to give the goalie a shot that he can save. So I think the biggest thing I would tell myself is just, try to stay as even keeled as possible, whether it's going well or whether it's going badly. And just kind of, form those connections with your defensemen as soon as you can, because they'll really sustain you in games when things aren't going your way.
Yeah. I love that. It's something that even keel, something I've heard quite a bit on the podcast. I don't know. For me, that's not how I operated, because I felt like the highs didn't really impact the lows, if that makes sense. Like me feeling high after I made a save wouldn't, and then if something went wrong or a bad series of plays, because I was high, it didn't take me into that low, if
Right.
that makes sense. But you're saying for you, when you really got high emotionally, it made you susceptible to be low emotionally at the same time.
I should have clarified that. So I think, when you get momentum in a game, when you get a few saves and you feel good about yourself, you should ride that as far as you can. Because I know what you mean. When you make a bad play and you've already made a few good plays, it kind of, you're still feeling good about yourself. I meant on a more general level. So say I'm having a bad slew of practices, that tended to not only affect my mental well-being in practice, but also outside of practice. Like I remember I would have a few bad practices and I'd be in bad moods like the whole day. You know what I mean? Like that would affect, like, I think I put a little bit too much pressure on lacrosse specifically to measure my kind of level of achievement in life in general. So I think just trying to take the pressure off yourself on a more general level, and just trying to remember that it is a game. You know what I mean? It's not like, it's not your life, it's not how you measure your value. So I think that's at least what I would tell myself. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting, because for many kids, it is their life, and it is how they measure their value,
And it was for me too, and I wish I could just tell myself, no, you're good,
Yeah, exactly. Like there's so many other parts of you as a person, and even if you have a bad game, it doesn't mean you're a bad goalie, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So Well, awesome, Zach. Well, Zach, thanks so much for coming on the show, man, and sharing your experiences and your stories. Awesome to hear. Awesome to chat with with a fellow Bear. Go Bears.
Oh, yeah, go Bears.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I think we've had more Cal goalies on this podcast than any other goalie, including
I know BD. Yeah, BD told me to say hi to you. So
yeah, BD. Let's see. Obviously, I'm on everyone. We've had Casey. We've had Rob Warner, who is the goalie right above me.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see. I feel like I'm forgetting some, but there you go. We'll have to make it a thing to get them all. Anyway, if I'm ever back in the Bay Area, I'll come out and check out a game or
awesome.
We'll meet up.
Yeah. Sounds
all
good.
Right. Yeah.
Thank
Zach,
Appreciate
one last thing, man. If you had to leave the goalies out there with the final piece of advice, what would that be?
Damn, that's a tough last one.
Yeah, all right.
I would say remember that it's a game. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well said, Zach. Thank you so much.
Yeah.